Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so very much for joining us today for our resume writing and job search workshop. We really want to, we're excited about having this opportunity to understand more about your career aspirations and where you are with your career, any potential opportunities to strengthen your resume and to enhance your job search capabilities. I am Dr. Christie Murray, and I am thankful for the opportunity to be able to join and facilitate today's discussion. And at any point during the discussion, if you'd like to come off mute or drop a comment in the chat or a question, feel free to do that. I'm going to pause real quick and give Ms. Chiquita an opportunity to share any opening remarks that she might have.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Chiquita Waller. I am the program specialist for the Adult Education Workforce Development program here at HOC with HOC Academy. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Adult Education Workforce Development program, otherwise known as AEWD, it is the agency's effort to promote self-empowerment, achievement, and upward mobility among residents by connecting them with career, training, educational services, and also the program is designed to meet residents at their individual levels of need, and then pave a pathway for them to achieve their training and career goals. So through partnerships with Montgomery College and other community organizations, the Adult Education Workforce Development Program offers tuition assistance, employment and internship opportunities, employment readiness workshops, referrals for ESL, GED, and vocational training. Also referrals for professional clothing as well. And I'm going to drop in the chat box the program participation link for your attendance today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Chiquita, for sharing that information and providing more on your organization. All right, we're going to jump right in, and hopefully, if technology works well, I'm going to start off with a video.
Everybody wants to be. Everybody has those goals. Get used to failing. Understand that failing is a part of success. You will not progress in the real world unless you put yourself in new situations. Some of you are walking around here with hidden strengths that you don't know about because you go day to day doing the exact same thing. It will be uncomfortable, but you know what? You'll find some power and you'll find some strength within yourself that you probably didn't know existed, and that'll make you even more of a force and even more of a brand than you can ever imagine yourself to be. You're interviewing these companies as much as they're interviewing you. Don't be afraid to ask them questions to get a better understanding of what their company has to offer you. Say that interview doesn't work in your favor. Question yourself, is there something wrong with my resume? If you feel that it is, get that checked out now. Understand there are things out there that will help you have a successful career. Wilbur Cross is more than a place you go to pick up your refund check. Use Wilbur Cross for its Center for Career Development. They have workshops 2 to 4 times a week that you should be attending, as well as career fairs they throw all the time. Go to them. Husky Career Link is a great guideline for job searches and for on-campus interviews. Most of us have Twitter, right? How about you follow a company and you interact with that staff and make connections? Why not use all these resources when they're right in front of you? Some of you are on the verge of graduating right now. Set realistic goals. Question what those goals mean for you. Do they line up with what you want to do in your future? If not, reassess yourself, and once you wrap your head around what you feel is missing, you will begin to better yourself in branding yourself. Who are you?
All right. So, with that being said, I love to kick off my discussions kind of with a tone setting video. And there's so many things that stuck out. I know he focused on more of a collegiate environment, but some of the principles that he shared in his video certainly resonate no matter where you are within your career journey. So, he talked about all of us having hidden strengths within us. And so what I want to make sure that we do is to get you to start thinking about, what are your hidden strengths? What are those things that make you uniquely you that nobody else can show up with? So congratulations and good news, because in today's workshop, I want you to definitely think of yourself in terms of, I am uniquely me. And guess what? There is nobody else on this planet just like me. How do you leverage that? How do you tap into that as we talk today? He also talked about not just when you're looking for a job or looking to switch careers, you're not just looking to be interviewed. You are also interviewing other companies. So you should feel empowered to know that you can position yourself. You should be asking those better questions and making sure that you know exactly what kind of environment professionally that you could walk into to make sure it's a good fit for you, not just that you're a good fit for that company. So I want to welcome and thank you to the workshop today. We are recording the workshop so that it can be available to other residents for future purposes. If you're not speaking, please mute your lines just to minimize any distractions. And then again, feel free, let's make this interactive, use the chat, come off mute so that we can have a really good dialogue. At the end of the day, this workshop is for you, and HOC is investing in your workforce development and readiness. So I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with me to be able to say, hey, Dr. Christie, what do you think about this kind of situation? Or this is what I've experienced. So share those things as we talk today. At the end of the day, I want to make sure that you walk away feeling like you have some strengthened capabilities when it comes down to being able to develop and to have a useful and impactful resume. So we're going to share some resume writing strategies with you. I want to make sure you feel empowered so that you can create an impressive resume. And when you give out your resume, you feel confident that it's going to be eye-catching and it's going to help you in your career endeavors. And then I want to give some strategies to make sure that you can refine your job search capabilities. Having a great resume is one thing, but also being able to refine how you go about looking for jobs will certainly help to make a big difference in your outcomes and results. And at the end of the day, if you're like me, you're about outcomes and results. You're trying to get from point A to B. You're trying to grow. You're trying to shift and pivot in different ways in your life. And having some of these strategies hopefully will help you to be able to do that. So I want to kick it off by sharing just a little bit about myself. I have a lot of different things going on, but I do want to give you some sense of why I entered this space that I am when it comes to job searching and more. I love learning. And so anytime I have an opportunity to watch a video, attend a workshop like this and more, I certainly look forward to the opportunity to do so, including formal training and education. I do have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I went to Hampton University, so I have a HBCU background. That's my foundation. And then I have several master's degrees, one in computer information systems, the other is a business administration master's, and then I have a doctorate in business administration. But I'm also a mother of two sons in college. I have a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old. So the other thing I do is I talk a lot to families about how to get accepted into college and graduate debt-free. And on Thursday with HOC, I did a workshop on college planning and funding. So happy to be back again to talk about resumes, because really I focus a lot with the professional and career development. And certainly the educational side of it is really the kind of the impetus. Education and training, focusing on your careers as the entryway into some of the other conversations around resumes and other professional development. I'm also a senior executive. I've worked both in the private sector for a number of different type of corporations and companies, doing engineering work, management, etc. I've been a hiring manager both in the private sector, but also I've spent 12 years in federal government. So I also bring that experience. And if you've ever tried to apply for a federal government job, you'll quickly be able to relate to the fact that it's not as easy. And there are some nuances and tricks of the trade, and I'll share some of those experiences as we talk today. But I have that experience too. When I left the federal government, I'm back in the private sector now, but I was a GS-15 in the federal government, and I was a hiring manager, supervisor, the whole 9 yards. So I have been through the entire hiring life cycle, both in the private sector experiences and in federal government with those experiences. And lastly, I am a serial entrepreneur. So I have two businesses right now. I am the CEO of Educational Excellence Incorporated, which is the umbrella in which I'm having this workshop today. And that business focuses on professional development services, careers. I do a lot of the college planning work out of that umbrella. I do a lot of coaching, professional development training, helping families who or individuals who need help with strengthening their professional leadership capabilities and more. And then I have a business called Invest in Others. And that business, I do work a lot with young people with their college and career efforts, making sure they can get into college and graduate debt free. So I bring to you a lens through which I'm looking at it as a young adult professional. I've written two books, one called College Planning Strategies I Wish Someone Had Told Me. The second one is College Funding Strategies I Wish Someone Had Told Me. And I'm currently working on my third one, Young Adulting Strategies I Wish Someone Had Told Me. Because the work I'm doing and the evolutionary work with younger generations, there is a lot, y'all, that they have no idea as they step out into the workforce post-college or post-high school, how to show up with some of those things. So all of those things I am currently working on, and I work in those spaces. So please just know I have a wealth of different experiences that can help to contribute to our discussion today. So what are we going to cover? We're going to start out with the current situation assessment. Where are you now, basically, with your career aspirations? So start thinking about that. Then we'll talk a little bit about how you show up. Then we'll move into the main two topics. We'll talk about resume writing, and I'll cover what is a resume, the types of a resume, what employers look for, the sections of a resume, what different type of resumes could you possibly create. And then I'll share some general resume guidance. And then we'll talk about job searches. How do you maximize your job searches? What are some of the top job search websites? Those kind of strategies to help you. And then lastly, we'll end with some closing remarks and a few giveaways. All right, so as we start on this journey, let me know in the chat, if you could just put in the chat whether you consider yourself a new professional, more of a seasoned professional, and let me know if you're currently looking for a job. So you could say seasoned professional and yes, I'm looking for a job, or no, I'm not currently looking for my next opportunity. But let me know in the chat where you are in your career. Have you been working for a while, or are you, more of a new entry level, so in a role in that capacity? Where are you in your career pursuits? Thank you, Danielle. All right, so entry level and looking for a job. And this helps me to be able to tailor the conversation to things that are relevant to all the participants. Anyone else want to share? Okay, someone's unemployed, entry level, looking for employment. Great. Seasoned professional. Okay, Department of Defense, GS6. And don't say only. Only it's okay to be a GS6. We trying to get you to that 7, 9, 12 and other levels in which you might want to aspire to as well. So that's perfectly okay. But thank you all for sharing that. Okay, currently looking for a job. Okay. And so I will talk about some of the things to help all those different categories and where you're entering the space as we talk. So, and the reason why I do that, I do believe anytime you are thinking about making a shift or a change, the best thing to do is say, okay, where am I currently? What's my starting point? Your starting point is different from Christie's, from Miss Shakita's, from Miss Bonita's, Miss Danielle's. Everybody is entering from a different place, and that's okay. But it's important for you to know if you're a college student or a high school student, a recent grad, if you're an entry level, wherever you are in your career endeavor, it's important for you to know where you're starting from, because that's how you're able to put together a winning plan and strategy to help get you to that next level. So I'm all about next leveling up in pretty much everything that I do. And I want to make sure that you all are seeing yourselves that way too. And then we already kind of talked on this. You should be asking, okay, am I currently employed? You might be, but you may say, I'm currently employed, but I know that there's more I can be doing, or I want to go to a company where I can really feel like I'm valued, or I can grow. So think about those things and what's important to you about where you are. And if you're unemployed, that's okay too. Let's try to talk about some things that can help you to change that reality too. What are your career objectives? Where do you want to see yourself? And it can be very simple. Don't make it overly complicated. I'm a real big proponent of simple but effective. So when you ask yourself, what are your career objectives? If you're unemployed, it might be to find employment working in an area where I could be happy, or, exercise my passion, or really utilize my skill sets, or be valued in what I'm doing. Others might say, I want to become a supervisor. I want to be moving to management, or maybe I want to change careers. So think about those things and where you are. Maybe I just want a new job because I don't like my supervisor. Now that's a reality too, because what I can tell you is most people who leave their job or leave companies, I hate to say it, but a lot of times it has to do with leadership or your supervisor, unfortunately. Now, if you're one of those supervisors where people want to jump ship, let's talk about that too. How do you strengthen your leadership capabilities so that your folks actually want to stay? So that's something that's important to think about as you think about your career objectives. And what are your aspirations? I'm here today, but in 3 years, I want to see myself here. In 5 years, I could see myself somewhere different. Maybe you want to transition out. I had a dear friend of mine who worked 18 years in the federal government. He started his own Black-owned financial investment firm, and he had a 2-year plan to sunset his 9-to-5 job and grow his personal business. So all of those different realities are things to be thinking about. Do you currently have a resume? Drop in the chat if you currently have a resume. Just give me a yes or a no if you have a resume already. Okay, yes. Okay, great, Ashley, Danielle, Benita, anyone else? Anybody have a resume? Anybody who doesn't have a resume? Okay, well, I'm going to assume that everyone has something that they use to describe themselves on paper when it comes for an employment opportunity. If not, we will talk about how to create a basic resume as a part of the discussion. The next question, and you don't have to answer this in the chat, but I want you to think about this personally and be honest with yourself. When was the last time you updated your resume? Number 6. And if you haven't updated it in a while, that's okay. But moving forward, I would encourage you to get in the practice of updating your resume every 3 months, once a quarter. Why? Sometimes it aligns with quarterly work reviews and you're already pulling together your accomplishments. Well, guess what? If you're pulling it together for other folks on your job, add those accomplishments to your resume at the same time, or at a minimum twice a year. Usually when I work with students in college, I have them do a simple resume. I call it a scholar profile. And I'll have them updated every winter break when they come home for the winter break, and every summer break. So if nothing else, twice a year, pause and say, you know what? It's time for me to update my resume. And some ask me, Dr. Christie, I'm not looking for a job right now. Why should I update my resume right now? And I'll tell you about me personally. As a professional, I don't care if I'm looking for a job or not. I'm updating my resume at least 3 to 4 times a year. And like I tell young people, you have to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. At any point, an employer could decide that they no longer need your services. They're downsizing and they're reducing their footprint. They want you to move into another area. You might not want to. And you're like, hey, let me see what else is out there. So you want to stay ready and have your resume reasonably updated most of the time so that you can pivot when you need to pivot. 7, does your resume concisely reflect what you have done? I would hedge that there are lots of key, great, phenomenal things that you have already done and that you're going to do that you have not captured. I recently went through and created a senior executive service resume for myself. Y'all you would be surprised. Even though I update my resume frequently, when I sat down, I realized, girl, homegirl, you're leaving off a whole lot of, I forgot I did that. And so the reason why you want to update it frequently is so that you don't forget key things that you have done. Does your resume reflect your accomplishments? Probably not as well as you could. So we'll talk more about that. And are you actively searching for employment? We've already kind of touched on that. Some of you said that you currently are looking for employment opportunities, and others may be okay where they are. And how many interviews has your resume landed you? So if you're actively looking for a job and you're putting your resume out on the street, how many interviews have you gotten? So think about that. You don't have to answer it now, but if the answer to that question is not many, then as the gentleman said in the video, maybe it's time for you to enhance your resume. So you're in the right place at the right time today to be able to think that through. So if you're not working, how do you upgrade your resume? Which company will you use to update it? So that's a really good question. Let me answer that. If you are not currently working, let's say you're door dashing though, you're not working at a traditional 9 to 5. There may be other things that you're doing to make money. Take credit for those on your resume. Consider it odd jobs or freelance opportunities, but take credit for that on your resume. I'll be transparent and give y'all a quick story. Last year, April, almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was working for this phenomenal company making $215,000 a year in the private sector. And my company was based in Houston. I lived here in the DC area. One of my coworkers was like, "Hey, I'm going to be in DC. Let's meet. Let's have an in-person meeting." Well, I go to the in-person meeting in DC, and when I walk into the conference room, I see my boss and HR on the screen, only to find out that the company was restructuring and they were doing away with my entire division. For the first time in 30 years, since I was 18 years old, I did not have a job. 2 sons in college, and I didn't have a traditional 9 to 5. And I sat there and I felt shocked, confused, stunned. I've been on the other side. I've had to let people go, and as a hiring manager, but I never not had a job. But I had the sense of calm come over me, y'all. And I heard this voice that said, "God got you. You're going to be okay." So I wrapped up. They gave me like a 6-month severance package, blah, blah, blah. So it was enough time for me to have a blessing in disguise. I had the summer off for the first time in 30 years. So I changed my mindset. I didn't say I was unemployed for the summer. What did I say? I said I had the summer off. So I told myself, how do I take advantage of this opportunity to slow down and regroup myself? The other good thing that I had going for me was the 2 businesses that I was running while I was working my 9 to 5. So I was able to spend more time growing my businesses and not working a 9 to 5. And I had the very question that was just asked in the chat. Well, how do you explain that gap in not having a 9 to 5? And I started thinking differently. Oh, homegirl, you're doing other things. I was doing website development. I was doing workshops like these. I was doing professional training workshops and more. But it wasn't on a traditional 9 to 5 where I was getting somebody else's check direct deposited every 2 weeks. And so I'm sharing that with you because I want you to think about your situation, in a positive way, B, in a constructive way, and C, figure out how to use your situation. No matter how doom and gloom you think it is, there's a silver lining in it you can leverage. So if you're doing any odd jobs, if you're doing lawn care, trying to make extra money, if you're babysitting, those are entrepreneurial activities. So you need to brand yourself as the CEO of your own company or freelance professional and use that to cover the gap of time that you weren't working a 9 to 5 and highlight what you did during that time. So let me know in the chat who asked that question. Faustina, if that helps you at all, if there are any things that you were doing that you can still take credit for while you might have a gap or when you had that gap. But it happens in 30 years, I never saw it coming. And that's the reason why I say you have to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And so I also believe in multiple streams of income, but we'll talk about that in another workshop. But years ago when I was in the federal government and they had that big 6-week government shutdown, I knew then everybody needs to have more than one stream of income. You should never be totally dependent on just one source of making a living. But don't get me on the soapbox. I'll come back to that. And a future workshop when we talk about entrepreneurship, if that's to come. But next, I want to pivot into how you show up. This is really to talk about what is your brand. So once you say, here's where I am currently, I'm either working, not working, trying to shift with my career. We're all in some space with that. How you show up matters. And so I spent a lot of time talking to young adults and professionals about considering yourself as a brand. Everything you do sets the tone for who you are. Everywhere you go, professionally and privately, could potentially be a job interview. I have gotten some pretty fantastic jobs just because people were watching me when I didn't realize they were watching me. So what I usually tell individuals, where you show up and how you show up both matter. Where do you show up? In person. When people meet you, what kind of experience do you create for them? Do you make them feel positive, uplifted, encouraged? Are you approachable? Those kind of things. On paper, like your resume, like this whole point of the workshop. This is generally, when you're doing job searches, or you're looking for a job, is one of the first ways that people will meet you. So if people meet you on paper first, you better make sure you're telling the best story you can. It's compelling. It's going to stand out like nobody else's, and you're going to differentiate yourself. Also, how you show up online matters. I talk a lot about this with my young adults who seem to think that they can put everything out there and hit delete, and it's no longer out in cyber, space in the cloud. And I remind you, the cloud is a vapor of smoke that's not going anywhere, and it's still out there. So how you show up with your social media, your professional profiles or lack thereof, those things can also be a great indicator. Believe it or not, I tell young people, college admissions offices, employers, they are going out and Googling Dr. Christie Murray and see what pops up. I would invite y'all to go to the chat and type in my name, Dr. Christie Murray or Dr. Christie Chambliss Murray, while I'm talking, and see what comes up. And I can hopefully tell you, let me put my name in the chat because sometimes my maiden name comes up. But if you go out and do this with yourself too, if you go out and Google your name, hopefully if your name doesn't come up, somebody else might share your name, of course, but you want to make sure you're presenting yourself in the best possible light at all times. Even when I post personal things, I'm never degrading people. I'm never talking about anything racist or biased or putting people down in anything that I'm posting, because I believe that my brand is very important. And when I talk to young professionals and young adults, I talk about how you show up in school, whether you're in undergraduate, high school, working on a graduate degree. Those things matter. You might need a reference or a letter of recommendation. But if you showed up in some really squirrely ways, they're going to be less likely to write a positive one or to speak of you in a positive light. And then for my athletes, because I do work with some scholar athletes, how you show up on the court, field, et cetera, matters too. You ever had a coach get reached out to? If you have any athletes, you or your family, and they call your old coach or their old coach, and the coach is like, always late for practice, uncoachable. You can't tell them nothing. They're prima donna. They think they know everything. And guess what? Next, they're moving on to the next scholar athlete. But also, not just where you show up, in person, on paper, online, at the school, or on your job. I could even add on your job to that category, or on, sports related. But also how you show up, your behaviors, your attitude. Do you have a positive attitude? Do you exercise self-discipline and balance? Do you show up to work on time or ahead of time? Or are you chronically late? So if you have some of those tendencies, no judgment here, but certainly use this as an opportunity to strengthen wherever you feel like you have some weaknesses. Set the example. Are you a leader in most environments? Not in your title. Leadership isn't about a title to me. It's about a way of life. It's about how you choose to show up in your life. You can be a leader at home with your family and your church, your, whatever organization affiliations you have, but certainly in your own life, because I believe self-leadership is the first sign of leadership and self-love. But are you a leader? Are you setting the example for other people to emulate? Hey, you know what? I like how Christie is moving. I like how she speaks to people. She preserves their integrity. She doesn't try to tear people down. Those things matter. Are you respectful? And can you communicate well on paper and in person, in front of a group and in private? You have to, as a leader, you have to have private conversations. I've had to have some difficult conversations with employees about their performance. I've had to have public conversations. I'm the president of my AKA chapter. And sometimes, I'll be honest, you'll have individuals to get in a public setting and they'll want to challenge each other or challenge you. So you have to be able to professionally communicate that way too. Or with my supervisor, I've had to manage up and communicate that way, or do public meetings or workshops like these. But your ability to articulate concisely and to be able to concisely share information that other people can receive will matter. So I say all that to say your brand is important. And from this day forward, you show up in every space like you are a brand, you're marketing yourself. Even with people who you don't think can help you, you don't know who they know, and you don't know how they may be able to be of value to you or how you can be of value to them as well. So develop a strategy or a habit of being professional. Your reputation should precede you. When Miss Worthy, when you walk into a room or when you leave a room, I always tell people, it's not what you say about me when I'm in the room. It's how you talk about me when I'm out of the room. And so your reputation is going to precede you. What will people say? How can you influence what people learn about you? By how you show up. And it's through those things we've already talked about. I will tell you that first impressions are lasting impressions. You ever met someone and the first time you met them, you're like, oh my gosh, obnoxious or a really phenomenal person, whatever that experience is. And then you see them again. The first thing you're like, oh, I remember her. She was great. She was really helpful. Or, oh my goodness, she was like a freight train waiting to happen. So you have to think about those things and how other people experience you. You can't control how you experience other people because that's how they show up. But you can certainly, to some extent, influence how they experience you. Not their opinion of you, but what you want to leave with them. Consider yourself on a continuous job interview and know this, somebody is always up next. So if you don't want to work on your communication skills, you don't want to strengthen your leadership capabilities, you don't want to take the time and the effort to strengthen your resume, guess what? Then your resume will likely be one of the ones they set to the side and they move on to the next applicant. So I want to share, make sure that you manage your brand up front because those things can make a significant difference in the outcomes that you might seek. So next we're going to move into, well, let me pause. Are there any questions about your brand? Anything about how you show up? Anybody struggling with anything in this area or exceeding and is very successful within these areas you want to highlight?
No.
No? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Miss Benita, and then we'll go to Miss Ashley. I'm sorry, Miss Worthy, and then Miss Ashley.
When you look for jobs, like what search engines are free and which one would you recommend? And is it better to go to a company website instead?
Okay, thank you for that question. I will tell you there are some really great free ones, and I have those later on a slide in my presentation. So we will definitely touch on that, and I will make this presentation available to all of you. I will share it with Miss Shakita, and so you'll be able to look at the list I'm going to share with you in just a few minutes. But I say exhaust all your options. The short answer is look for the free ones, and certainly go straight to company websites because sometimes they'll post things there or post them quickly there that you might not see in other places. But we'll talk more about that. And Miss Ashley, your question?
Do you have any resources for like trying to where to start with build? Well, I know you mentioned where to start with building your brand, but like maybe like some specific steps. Because I actually just for the first time, honestly, just thought of myself in that way the other day, and it was a very intimidating feeling. Um, and so yeah, that and I figured that that is something that I really did need to start doing, and it's just like I said, it feels very like a very overwhelming thing to undertake.
Well, I think that's a great question. I don't have any that I was going to introduce in today's workshop, but let me just share you. I want to ease your overwhelming part of it. Just start with being a good person, being a positive, constructive person. And situations where everybody goes south and go negative, look for the good in those situations and make the more you're able to help people to see the good in themselves and to be positive and constructive, it's a great start. It's not all, but those are things that money can't buy. When I think about building a brand, focus on the things that other people don't show up with and money can't buy. You can take as much training, but if you have a negative and a very toxic spirit, people see that. So focus on how people experience you. Some of the things we've already kind of talked about here are great examples to start. Do the small things well, be consistent. Um, and are you thinking, Ashley, when you said you realized recently you had to work on building your brand or looking at taking your brand more serious, in what context? Was it on a professional job? Are you doing something like from an entrepreneurial standpoint? What's the space that made you come to that conclusion? If you're okay with
Yeah, no worries. It is like professionally. I do eventually want to start a nonprofit, but I know that the professional space is a great opportunity for me to build myself in that way, so that I do have the confidence um to do that. So just and when I would apply for jobs before in the past, because I worked in the insurance industry
Mhm.
for 15 years, and um that's all I only did that because that's all I felt that I could do. And now that I'm trying to pivot, I really can only see myself as an insurance professional. And I know that there are many uh characteristics and many skills that I learned that I can transfer over, but as I'm like applying to anything other than an insurance professional, I honestly, I don't know why, but I just can't get outside of that label that I put on myself. For some reason, I just felt so
Mhm.
intimidated trying to do something else.
Okay, so we'll highlight. I want, as we're talking today, think differently about how best to leverage the skills and the qualifications and the capabilities of an insurance professional other places. So we'll come back to that, but I will tell you that, as you look to really maybe make a career shift or a career change, how do you do that? And a part of it comes with how you brand and sell what your capabilities are too. So we'll touch on some of those things, but I'll try to make a note to flag some things that I think will help you as we're talking.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. All right, so next we're going to start talking about what is a resume. So let's kick it off with what a resume is not. A resume is not a place where you're just going to just do a dump of a long list of everything you've ever done in your whole life. On average, a resume that's 1 to 3 pages in length is ideal. 1 page if you're more of an entry level professional, and longer as you might have had different roles, different experiences, and different honors and accomplishments and those sort of things. But you don't want to have a laundry list of everything you've done in one resume. What I would encourage you to do is have multiple versions of your resume so that they tell different stories. And one of your first gems, Miss Ashley, is one of the things that I do. Now, I've already mentioned I do this, and this. So when I'm applying for jobs, I don't put everything in one resume. I don't highlight it the same way. So if you're doing an insurance, if you have a great insurance job, you see, you're going to have an insurance version of your resume, your current resume. And it's going to highlight those things that insurance professionals are going to look for. But let's say you want to move into, and I'm just making up something, training and education. Now you're going to highlight what you did in the insurance industry that was education and training focused. Maybe you consistently trained a workforce of 30 professionals. So now you're going to focus, you've designed a training curriculum for the insurance industry. Less about the industry, more about the design of what you did in that particular version of your resume. So now, not only did I work in insurance and I have a general resume, now I have a whole spin-off resume that focuses on how I train people well across my career. So that's how you're able to build multiple versions of your resume and save them as such. Training. Now, another thing I do, I work with youth development. So I have a youth development component of my resume where I work trying to help young people get more interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So I have multiple spinoffs to my resume. I have a senior executive resume. So don't think that one resume is a one size fit all. Now, what I encourage you to do is start with one resume, put everything on it, and then you cherry pick out what you need for the other resumes. So you'll have it all comprehensive, but then you don't necessarily use that resume often because it's going to be pretty long, but you use that to pull out, extract out what you need for some of the more targeted resumes. A resume is not a place to duplicate your job description. So let's say Miss Ashley works in insurance, and when she first hired on, they said, here's your job description, Miss Ashley. Here's what you're going to be doing every day. You're going to be taking inventory of all of our medical clients. You're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. You're not going to just copy that from your job description into your resume. Now, I always love having job descriptions handy when you're creating a resume, but it's not simply just replicating what's on it. You're refining it. You're like, okay, I do these things, but now I'm going to highlight them a little bit differently on my resume. So you want to use it as a reference. Yes, Ms. Worthy.
Yeah. What about volunteer jobs? Like, is that the same
You can
as a
include
regular job?
volunteer work, and we're going to talk about that. But yes, ma'am, that is definitely an area that I recommend that you include. And sometimes you can find creative ways to talk about your volunteer community service sort of endeavors and activities. But yes, I think there's a place for that in resumes, on a resume, and depending on the type of job you're seeking. Because sometimes, let's say you're looking for a community outreach job. They want to know what you're doing in the community. They might be very interested in community, service and volunteer type work. So don't lose sight, add that to your long resume so you'd be able to extract that out at times when you need it too. So for sure. And a resume is not a tool for you to fabricate what you can do. Now, fabricate is just a creative way of saying lying on your resume. Don't make stuff up, y'all. Now, I understand that some folk do that all the time. I don't recommend that we do that. I do believe that you should tell your story. Your story is impactful enough for you to tell a really good story about where you are without having to make up something based on somebody else's, how you think they may view you. I'm not making up anything. I have been blessed to have worked in many different ways, and it's about how you are able to creatively tell your story. So that's what we want to focus on more so than making things up. All right, so next, what is a resume? So we talked about what a resume is not. What is a resume? It should be a summary of your career objectives. Here's what I want to do next. Here's what I'm seeking to get employment with. It should have a highlight your employment experience, briefly your education, and also any special skills that make you uniquely different than the next candidate, for example. So you want to make sure that you're putting things, laying it out in a way that tells your story. A resume is also a great way to showcase the important information about you in a short amount of time. Did you know on average, those who are reviewing resumes and hiring managers, they spend about 7 seconds on a resume. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That much time. So the first page of your resume is the most important page of your resume. So how you design it, you have to think about the job. You have to think about what you're trying to do, your objectives. and what kind of opportunity you're going after, and also how they say they want to see the information, what information they want from you. So if you read a job announcement or a posting, and I'll just make something up, I'll go back to the training, and they're looking for training or training and development professional. What do you want to highlight on page 1? Everything that you've been really impactful with when it comes to training and development. So if they have to wait till they get to page 3 and that's 7 seconds, they're on to the next resume. So get in the habit of saying, okay, once you create your resume and you go and you're applying for a job, you say, does what I need for this job, does it stick out on page 1? If the answer is no, refine it. It's okay to refine a resume you've already written, specifically tailored for a job. Also, a resume is a great way to detail your strongest skills and accomplishments. Oh, so I'm not just listing job tasks. I did this, I did that, I did that, I did this. No, you're not. You're also highlighting, I did this and I saved the company $20,000. I did that and we were able to recruit 5 new workers because of my new recruitment strategy I put together. You want to talk about what, how, and why it matters concisely. So there's an art to it. So this is where it's an opportunity to strengthen your writing, strengthen how you tell your story. You also want to have a description of your qualifications. What makes you unique? We've talked about uniqueness a lot. You're going to hear me talk a lot about unique, because you want your resume to stand out from everybody else's. It should have a highlight of your strengths and capabilities that match the job. So Miss Ashley might have a bunch, in that resume she has is focused on insurance. Her strengths and capabilities are going to be insurance related insurance importance. They want to know, are you customer service focused? Do you have a great sales capability? Are you an effective communicator? Do you know how to increase revenue? So you want to highlight those things. If there's certain systems they use a lot in that industry, highlight, oh, I know these systems very well. Those kind of capabilities you want to highlight based on the nature of the career or the job that you're seeking. And then you want your resume to grab their attention, whether it's an employer, recruiter, or, and I'll talk a little bit more about an applicant tracking system, because right now we know that an applicant tracking system might be the first introduction to your resume. Sometimes companies now are using these ATSs to sift out whose resume is going to even get to the hiring manager. So the ATS system might look at your resume before a live person actually does. So how do you grab that attention? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I would be remiss if I wasn't honest and tell you, your resume, most people think, oh, if I have an award-winning resume, I'm going to get the job. No, your resume is going to get you to the interview. How you show up on paper is going to get you to how you should show up in person. So your number one goal with your resume is to get to the interview, y'all. If you have an ineffective resume, that means you're going to be weeded out. You're not going to be the competition, and you're not going to get selected for the interview or the job. So focus on a compelling and eye-catching resume. So that's one of my key messages. Now we're going to move into the types of resumes. So there's 3 different areas we're going to look at. One is the order of your resume. How will you list things on your resume? Chronological order means you're going to do it, and it's the most common way that people have their resumes written. Your work history is listed in the order in which you held a position, usually from the most recent job to the most outdated job. For example, if Miss Worthy currently works for the post office and she has for the last 5 years, that's going to be listed first. She's a postal clerk, mail clerk. Then let's say 6 years ago, she worked for the 7-Eleven and she was a sales clerk. That'll be the next one. And then let's say 20 years ago, she worked somewhere else. So your most current job first, then your next job you held prior to that, and then all your past experiences in the order. So it should be 2024, 2022, 2019, 2018. That's chronological. Your most current job listed at the top. This is the most common type of resume, and it is very commonly used to highlight your work history. What have you done comprehensively? What are the different places you've worked? And then the second category is functional. This is where you focus on the skills and experience more so than the order in which you work the job. So you're going to focus on those relevant skills. This is a great resume if you're trying to change careers, like Miss Ashley talked about. So Miss Ashley, you should probably create a functional resume because you're shifting from insurance. And I'm just curious, Miss Ashley, what are you interested in doing if you're not, what are you considering that's different from insurance?
I want to become a therapist. I'm graduating from Montgomery College with my psychology associates. Then I'm going to go to University of Maryland to get my psychology BS.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. And congratulations. And hopefully, I don't know if you were on my workshop on Thursday, but when it comes down to finding funding, that workshop is coming up again. HOC is hosting it a second time coming up, I think on May 18th. But I highly encourage you to attend that one because you do have that financial, you're continuing your education. But that's great to know. So you want to transition from being in insurance to a therapist. So you want to highlight skills that deal with people, helping people, solving people's problems, helping people to solve their own problems, more importantly. Those kind of things you want to highlight, even though you did them in an insurance arena. Now you want to create a functional resume that talks about how you help people or how you have coached and encouraged people to solve their own issues. You see the difference?
Yeah. Yes. When you mentioned earlier about the branding and being positive and how people see you, that was like, that's how, not to toot my own horn or anything, but that's how people describe me, from my customers, from my coworkers, from my to everybody. They always say things like that about me. But just going into a job and saying that, I just don't feel like you mentioned earlier, being like unique qualities and being creative. I guess that's where I'm struggling with, actually, because they say a good person doesn't say they're a good person, right? Or things like that.
Right.
I just, it's really hard, really, really hard for me to highlight the good qualities about myself. I could tell you the bad things about me in a minute,
Most people can.
but I can't. So that's where I struggle. But I know that's extremely important, especially for where I am in my career. I'm sorry.
So two things. One, y'all, your resume is exactly the place to toot your own horn. This is the time. This is going to get you to the interview. When you get to the interview, toot your own horn there too. This is not the time to be humble. It's not the time to be conceited, but it's the time to be confident. And secondly, Miss Ashley, you might focus on your negative, but I heard something incredibly powerful that I think is important to share with the full group. Other people say that's who you are. You already have a brand.
Yeah.
That's their experience with you. And those are the things you want to highlight in your resume. So if you want to do something, ask other people, hey, what do you think I'm really good at? Or, hey, what kind of experience do you have with me? Do you think I'm helpful? I'm creative? Do I have good customer service? Then those are the things you want to highlight on your resume because those are things that are organically who you are. Yes, Miss Worthy.
What type of resume would you recommend somebody's been out of the workforce for a while?
Okay, so that's a really good question. The functional resume. So as you notice, it says career change or inconsistent work history, meaning you might have done something different. Why? Because it's not focused on the chronological order. Date, 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 date. Stay away from the date, 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 date if you know you might have a gap in your timeline. You want to move towards a more functional. Highlight your skills, your experiences that you do have, your capabilities, your qualifications. This is a great place to do that. So if you have limited education but you have a lot of experience, functional resume would be great. If you have experience and or education, but maybe you have a gap in your work history, then go functional again, because then you can highlight, educational professional, or, I've, trained, or I do website development. Well, you can do website development working for a company. You can do it on your own. I do it all the time. I help people build websites, but I do it in my own private time, and they pay me outside of a 9 to 5. So think about those things that you do, that you've been doing. If you bake cakes, that's an entrepreneur. You have a cake baking business. You are a entrepreneur. You are a salesperson. You are a creator. So if you've been doing that for 15 years while you work for someone else, and now you don't work for those other people anymore, but you kept baking cakes, focus on your career, the work that you've done, the income generating work you've done in whatever space that is. And the functional resume will help you to be able to do that. And then you have, lastly, the combination resume. And this is kind of a mix where you might want to go in chronological order, but you still want to highlight certain blocks of different type of skills or capabilities you have. It's used if you want to focus equally on your work history and your skills. And it's not necessarily used the most, but it is available. So that's why I put those 3 different types, and I go back to what's your current situation. So if you know that you have a need to shift careers right now, or I might have a block of time where I didn't work a traditional 9 to 5, then I would recommend you go with the more of a functional style resume, where you're not necessarily focusing on the years, but you're focusing more on the categories of work you did. Categories of work that you did. And you just might put a block from 2012 to 2018. And then list those companies or those things that you did, but you're not necessarily putting a date next to each one of them underneath that. So you can be creative with those things to tell your unique story. Now, so that's one type. So first, you want to make sure you get the order right and how you want to lay it out, functional or chronological, or do a combination of the two. Now, think about your experience level. And we do have some entry level professionals on, if you're entry level, you should have 1 or 2 page resume. You should not have a 10-page resume and you worked at McDonald's and Taco Bell, or if you did an internship while you were in college and that was it. Nothing wrong with any of those professions and places to work, but it just doesn't necessitate more than 1 or 2 pages to tell that story. So if you have a limited work experience, if you're a student, a recent graduate, maybe you've been a stay-at-home parent and you're now entering the workforce after 10 years, but you don't really have a lot of experience working outside of the home, those would be more entry level. You're going to highlight your skills and qualifications. What can you do? So if you're entry level, you want to highlight what can you do? I have the education, I have the training, I can do these things with that. I have these computer skills, I have these not interpersonal skills. What can you do? In 1 or 2 pages. If you are a mid-level professional, you want to shift. You see the entry level, they focus on skills and qualifications. Mid-level, you want to focus on skills and experience. What can you do? What have you done? That means you've already been working at least 5 to 10 years. So you're building a nice little professional experience in different ways. You've worked with customers, you've presented publicly, you've advised senior leaders, you've recommended solutions, you've created strategies, you have outcomes to speak to. Now you're able to highlight accomplishments and results because you've worked somewhere. And that you can probably do in 2 to 3 pages. So your resume should become progressively more elaborate and length based on how long or how robust your professional experience has been. And then the last category, and I kind of see myself in this category, senior level. I have probably 30 plus years of professional experience. My resume is 3 to 5 pages. It's closer to 5 because of some of the different things I've done and other things that I highlight, but it should highlight your experiences, what you have done, and what kind of outcomes it led to. What did you do and how does it make a difference? It's the so what part of it. If you're a senior level and you don't have quantifiable achievements and results, you might not be senior level. You might have been working there a long time, but you might not be senior level because your results should be impactful progressively impactful to the organization or even outside of your organization. And you should see the evolution between middle level and senior level. You should start to see your leadership capabilities starting to expand as well. So those are the ways in which I want you to think about where you are in terms of experience levels. And then lastly, what type of sectors have you worked in? Someone mentioned, I think it was Ashley mentioned she wanted a nonprofit. I talked earlier about my background. The private sector is out working for a company, whether it's Exxon or Target or Google or Apple or those private sector companies, those companies that make a profit, for-profit entities and nonprofit entities, like the Boys and Girls Club or a foundation. Those are considered more private sector companies or organizations. The public sector are those that are funded by taxpayers or the public funds, like taxpayer money, such as the federal government, state government, local government. So governmental entities, I generally consider public sector. And I have experience in the private sector and the public sector professionally. You may as well. And so being able to highlight that in a concise way, I have an executive summary on one of my resumes, and it highlights that I have private and public sector, senior leadership capabilities. So people sometimes, depending on the nature of the job you're hiring for, they want to know, did you work for a nonprofit before? Or did you work in federal service or government before? So that's why looking at those all three ways matter. So if you were to ask Dr. Christie, which type of resume is right for you? And I want you to ask yourself that. I put mine in pink. And then the question mark is for you to ask yourself. So if you were to think about your order, which type of order would work best for you? Is it chronological, the functional, or the combination? For me, it was chronological for certain jobs. Others, it's more functional. But in general, I have a chronological resume, and it tells from 2024 on down what I did. My experience level, I consider myself a senior level professional. How do you see yourself? If you don't know, ask other people that you trust and you value their input. Ask people that you trust and ask them, what do they think you are if you're not sure? And then, or a manager or someone who might be more senior level, tell them what you do and see what they think. And then lastly, have you had work experiences in the public sector or private sector or both? Because that's going to help you figure out how you want to design your specific resume. Okay? I hope that helps when it comes down to the different types of resume. And I don't want you to use this and say, oh my God, this sounds really complicated. It is not. Simply put, you want to either highlight things as you held the jobs. You either want to highlight them by the different roles you had, education, sales, customer service. And you can either say, I've worked in federal service my whole time, like we have someone who worked for the Department of Defense. They may say, oh, I've been in private sector or the public sector my whole career. So it'll be an easy question to answer, and they may be targeting public sector jobs. Maybe they want to only focus on government jobs. So it helps you to figure out how to tailor your resume and where you might want to focus. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about preparation. So now that you know what kind of idea of where you want to go with your resume, I want to work on an entry-level resume. I'm going to do it in chronological order, and I'm really looking for jobs both. You might say I'm looking for jobs in the private sector and the public sector. So then I think you need to have two versions of your resume, because the private sector, if you're looking for a corporation or a job working for a company, that resume will be tailored a little bit different than if you're looking for a federal government type job. So those resumes will have some subtle nuances to them. But that's important for you to know what you're trying to achieve and accomplish, or where you're trying to work, so that you'll know how to focus your time and energy. So now that moves us into, well, how do you focus your time and energy? You're going to focus it preparing, right? You're going to spend your time and energy preparing. Preparation matters. You want to make sure your shoes, when you're running, you don't just put on some flip-flops and go out and hope you get the best score, the best speed. No, you're not going to do that. You're going to probably damage your toes, fall, stumble. So you want to make sure you are equipped, prepared, your shoes are tied, you have on socks if you need to, you have on the best running shoes, you've warmed up, all those things. Same when it comes down to your job search and your resume capabilities. One of the first things I want you to do, whether you have a resume or you don't, start gathering some information. Do a brain dump. Get a file on your computer. Have some subfolders. Have a physical folder like I do here. I keep folders labeled with different things. Everything I'm doing, I have an organized approach to it. But here's what I want you to do. You ever sit down and write a resume and it's like, oh, I don't even know where to start. What did I do 5 years ago? What did I do 8 years ago? What did I do on that job? Only thing I can remember is I couldn't stand my boss and I couldn't wait to get out of there. But I want you to get a little bit more focused. I want you to go back. I want you to make a list of all your past employers. If you don't already have it, it may already be on your resume. And if it is, great. Your past employers and who you work for. Well, who was your supervisor's name? Maybe they're still there, maybe they're not. But if you can remember their name, email address, and phone number, put that on the list too. Then I want you to have the job descriptions. If you can go back when they sent you that congratulatory letter, this is what you're going to be doing, or you can go back and find the job description to your current job or any past jobs, gather those up. Guess where a great place to write a resume from? How many of you use your past performance plans to write your resume or to enhance your resume? Guess what you're highlighting? You ever have a supervisor say, hey, Ms. Worthy, I'd like for you to submit your self-evaluation or your self-performance appraisal by close of business next Friday? And you're like, okay, and you sit down and you're trying to come up with, I developed 8 widgets, I hired 4 new people, I did X, Y, and Z, and it's already in your performance plan. It's a great place to pull out key accomplishments and results. And your boss might have highlighted some as well. Grab theirs too and use those as you're sitting down to write. And then as you're looking for jobs, let's say, oh my God, this job is perfect for me. I'm going to print out and save PDF the job announcement or the job posting. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to highlight key things. Oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, I do this well. Oh, I know I can speak to that. Use that to help you with your resume, because you're going to go back and say, they say they're looking for someone with great customer service skills. And I know I've been doing that for the last 15 years. So now I want to make sure I tailor my resume to highlight that and create accomplishments around that, because this is a big deal to this company. Your education, make sure you have access to where you went to school. Miss Ashley's in school currently, going to be going to school again. Make sure you're keeping track of that, putting your current, if you're still in college, put that too. It's okay to say Montgomery Community College or whatever the name of your college is, anticipated graduation 2025 with a bachelor's degree or associate's degree or whatever it is, or a certificate or whatever it is you're pursuing. Put that in there. Keep your transcripts handy. Sometimes employers will want to know if you're getting a job and it's based off of your education that you have. They want access to an unofficial or official copy of your transcript. You should always have copies of your unofficial transcripts on your computer, ready to send off if you need it. You got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So you don't want to have to fumble and go back, oh my God, I don't know how to get my transcripts from my college. I hadn't been back there in 20 years. There's no reason why you haven't gotten a transcript in 20 years when you know you have been looking for jobs and you have things that you want to do, and you always want to have that to reference. Keep a list of your training courses. I love free training, y'all. When I work 9 to 5s and they say, who would like to be in this leadership development program? Me. Who would like to learn how to write more effectively? Me. I'm always, if you're giving it to me for free, the only thing better than a good education is a free good education. So take advantage of all the training courses, keep a list of that, the date you took it and what company gave it, Management Concepts or Federal Executive Institute, whoever gave the course, just keep a list. It doesn't have to be extensive, but when you took it, where it was at, and and what the class was itself. And same with certifications. And then list your past employers. I already had that. I'm gonna have to take that box out. But community service. So Miss Worthy, I think you talked about that earlier. Do you add community service? Yes, you do. You want to track your community service. I'm on a board of a foundation. I do a lot of philanthropic work out in the community. I'm the educational ambassador on that foundation. I'm also an AKA. We do a lot of community service out in the community. I also host events on my own where I give scholarships away each August to students. I have donors and I host a 2-day summit. That's volunteer community service work. How do you take credit for those things and tell your unique story? If they want to know how do you help the community, tell it only like you can. Yes, Miss Worthy.
Do you also include the supervisors for volunteer work?
Say that
Or
again.
do you include the supervisor for volunteer work, or do you just
You
do it for
could. So if you do
regular?
volunteer work and there is a point of contact or reference you want to provide, you could absolutely. I absolutely would. Because if you want to and they want to reach out and say how well Miss Worthy did, they'll be able to tell that praise story for you pretty easily. So yes. You also want to include your honors and awards. How many of y'all have a list? How many of y'all can toot your own horn like Miss Ashley says she's not good at that? I keep a list. I have gotten so many honors, awards, and certificates, and I'm not ashamed to say it because my work speaks for itself, and I'm not doing it to benefit me. I'm doing it to benefit others. But sometimes it's the recognition that other people have of you that you have to speak to too. So if you've been in the federal government and you've got cash awards, if you've got on the job awards or time off awards, or if you've got the diversity award, leadership awards, whatever, maybe you've been honored or recognized for certain things, include those concisely. The award, presidential award for X 2025 or 2023, volunteer community service award, list that there. Because sometimes you'll get awards for your great community service efforts too. So definitely you want to have a placeholder for it. List all of your awards on that master resume you have. And then if you have a specific resume, let's say Miss Ashley is interested in an insurance job and she's gotten a community service, not a community, but a customer service award. Well, I'm going to move that over here because they're all about customer service. So I want to highlight, I've gotten awards in this area because that's of importance to them. Also, if you have professional memberships and affiliations, include those. I've been a member of the National Society of Black Engineering, the American, African American for Blacks in Energy. I'm in the International Association of Facilitators. All of those professional organizations matter. So if I'm looking for an educational job and they love people who can facilitate, guess which one I'm going to put on there? The one that talks about my International Association of Facilitators. So that's the beauty of having a comprehensive resume, and then you cherry picking out. If you can only do 3 pages on a resume, you don't include all of it. You only pull out the ones that are going to really help spotlight you for that particular resume. And then always have ready, I don't necessarily include references on my resume, but some people do. I think it takes up space. Nobody's going to call a reference until they already know they like you, and usually they'll ask you for your references. But if you're looking at a job announcement and they give you instructions on what to include, always take something else off if you run out of space. If they say, Miss Bonita, only give me a 2-page resume, but I want you to highlight these things and provide 2 references, give the people what they ask you for first. Make sure that can fit on your 2 pages. And then if you got room to fit other things that's going to sell your story and tell your story differently, you start plugging those in. But give people what they ask you for. And if they say no more than 2 pages, what are we not going to do? What we ain't going to do is give them 3 pages. Because that's the quickest way to disqualify yourself. As I have looked at resumes, the first thing I do is I look to see how well it's laid out. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it jumbled up and overwhelming? Do I have a headache just by looking at it? I'm going to put it to the side and may not come back to it. Second thing is, did they follow directions? Did they give me 2 pages when I asked for 2? Did they put their education at the top like we asked for? So you have to read each job announcement and make sure you are compliant with what they're asking you for. So as you are preparing, you want to highlight the different type of jobs that you've held. Odd jobs, we talked about that. If you know that you haven't worked in traditional 9 to 5, but you've done some things, I believe everybody has done something. Whether you babysat it, whether you DoorDash, whether you Uber drove, whether you have done some things, everybody has done something. Whether you bought groceries and took it to people's homes, whatever it is, highlight those things in a way that tell your story uniquely, that's more focused on the skill sets and the capabilities. If you're in high school, highlight your high school jobs. If you're in college, highlight your internships. If you work part-time, highlight what you've done part-time. Full-time, the same. We've already talked about volunteer opportunities. There are places for that. Entrepreneurial jobs. So me, it's always tricky because I do work a 9 to 5 now, and I'm still working my 2 businesses. So I have to creatively tell those stories in a way that is not going to confuse people. Sometimes when you do the most, you have to be careful about how you say that, because while it might excite some people, it might turn off some people. And I hate to admit this, but sometimes I don't even include all levels of my education. If I think it's too much for who might be reading it, because some folks get intimidated if you have a doctorate degree and they don't want to hire you, and they'll say, hide behind, you're too overqualified. So I don't always add my PhD. Not that I'm not proud of it, because I am, but I'm about outcomes. So I try to position myself to get the best outcomes I can. And then if you've done freelance work, highlight those as well. Anything you've done that you can take credit for with providing services and products. Make sure you take credit for all the things that you've done. And that is going to require you to think differently. Maybe you sell cakes. Maybe you work a whole 9 to 5, but you never thought about the wreaths you make at the holidays or the candles that you make for Mother's Day as being job or employment worthy. Guess what it is? It is, y'all. So think back to what you do well that you get paid for, and what you do well that you don't get paid for. Skills are skills. You've developed talents in different ways, highlight those. And I know I probably said that quite a bit. So now that you've gotten prepared, you've gotten all your documents. So let me go back, and this slide is very important. Spending the time up front preparing makes it so much easier when you sit down to write. When you're sitting down to refine your resume, to write it, refine it, whatever that is. Because now you've got your experience, your education, your skills, your list of training courses, all the things that led up to it are right in front of you now. The worst thing you can do is sit down with a blank sheet of paper or an old version of your resume, and you haven't done the preparation to pull in things from your performance plan and those other areas I've already described. Why? Because there are some key sections that you should have as a part of your resume. Sometimes the job announcement will dictate to you what they want to see. So you always start with reading that job announcement very carefully and make sure you get those things on your resume. But you should always have your contact information, your name, your address, a good phone number that you actually answer when people call, even unknown numbers. And I'll be honest, this is not the time. If you know you're actively looking for a job, this is not the time to screen your phone calls. Answer every call. If it's a bill collector, hey, I ain't got it. I'm working on getting the opportunity to be able to pay you later, or I need a payment plan. But answer your phone, y'all. I know we get a lot of spam too nowadays. And you think, oh, I don't recognize this number, I'm not answering. Answer the spam and say no, thank you, because that could be an employer calling you. So make sure you have good contact information, a reputable email address, Superstar 69, Big Booty Christie. Those things do not work professionally, okay? And I'm joking around with that, but I have seen some stuff, y'all. I have seen some stuff. And you see these email addresses and you're like, what in the world? Now, you know, they could have created a free Gmail email just for career purposes. I did the same when my sons were going to college. They had we set up a whole new email address because I wanted to make sure we were both checking their emails and we weren't missing opportunities. So once you get an email that you want to use, check your email daily when you start applying for jobs. Because if they want to call you in for an interview and you ain't checked your email in 3 days, guess what? Too late. We've moved on to some other candidates. So I'm getting off track, but contact information matters. Use it and make sure you're available once you include it. So if you put a certain email address, that's the one you need to be checking every day. If you don't check any other email accounts you have, check the one that your job applications are going to be linked to. Your career objective, that should be included on your resume. Your education. Now, education, sometimes you can put it on page 1, sometimes you move it down. If you're applying for a job and they say you must have a bachelor's degree in engineering, put it up top. If they say education is nice, but it's not required, move it down. Whatever they say is most important goes on which page? Page 1. Your professional profile. Sometimes you can include it. I have a summary on mine and it says something like experienced 25-year professional with senior level leadership experience in the public and private sector. Whatever I think might stick out for that entity, I might have a little mini couple of sentences that describe why I'm the top professional for their job. Your employment history. This is where you get into how you describe it. Is it chronological? I did this in 2024, this in 2022, or is it functional? I'm going to focus on education, then customer service. That's where you're going to get into that in the employment history piece. Then you need training, certification, education. If you have training courses that are relevant to the job, memberships and affiliations. See, we talked about all these categories here. So now when you're writing your resume, you're just plugging them in. Look at that. The most time consuming, I won't say challenging, is the employment history. That's where you really, you can actually build all these other areas first and then say, now that I've gotten everything else done, because plugging in your training is easy. It's a list. Memberships is a list. Community service, probably a list. Honors, a list. References, 2 to 3 people, if you include it on your resume at all, but have it at least in a separate file somewhere you can get to if you don't. But it's a list. So the one thing that you're going to spend the most time wordsmithing is your employment history. So do things that make it easier for you. Now, I have introduced, now I use this one with my young adults, young professionals. This is more of an entry-level style resume, but as you can see, it's got the contact information, objective, education, professional profile, employment history. And I included a couple so you can see, you can add in them in chronological order. This says 2021, this one would say 2019. But it has those things, those same categories here on the basic resume template. I am including the QR code. You can actually download this template if you like it from my website. It's available. It's a Microsoft Word document. So you don't have to start from scratch. I'm a real big proponent on giving people templates and tools to help expedite their process. I don't want you to get bogged down with, I don't know what template to use. Keep it simple. The reason why I like this one, it ain't got a whole bunch of colors. It doesn't have a whole bunch of bold or not bold, but caps, uncap. That's distracting. It's very clean and concise. That's what people want to see. They only have 7 seconds on your initial first page to see if they want to turn the page. So you want to make sure that the format is not a distraction. So seriously consider what format and what kind of template you use. But if nothing else, here's one to get you started. Next, some general guidance. When it comes to resumes, have a plan. Don't just sit down and say, oh, I need a resume, I'm looking for a job. Think about what kind of job you want to look for. Some of the things we already talked about up front. How do I tell my story? I've been out of work for a while. Last year when I was not working a 9-to-5, but I was growing my businesses, that's how I tell my story. But when they sunsetted my 9-to-5 job, that was from April to September. I had a nice I woke up every day and decided what I wanted to do that day. And I grew my business. I got my woman-owned small business certification with the federal government, but I had a plan. I didn't just say, oh my God, I don't have a 9 to 5. I lost $215,000 salary. I said, oh, God got something next for me. He's moving me into this space to put me in a different place. I have to create a plan and I have to figure out why. What's my purpose? So start with a plan, figure out what your purpose is. And as you do that, you start looking for jobs, follow the people's directions. As you're building and you're modifying your resume, follow their directions. Build your resume in a way that it is concisely written. Get to the point. Tell your story uniquely. Nobody else is you. Nobody is going to tell Ashley's story like Ashley. Nobody else has been in insurance helping people and now have the benefit of being a therapist. Now, as a therapist, when you're doing therapy work, you can say, well, oh, I know all about insurance. Oh, you're having insurance challenges? Well, you might want to check on these insurance companies too, because you now have that to draw on. And so be able to use that uniquely for your storytelling. Reduce wordiness. What you can say in 10 words, revisit your work to see how can you tell it in 4. From 10 to 4. People use things like in order to. You don't need 3 words, just say 2. Due to the fact of. You don't need to say that. You say because. You see my point? So it's simply, I go back through my writing all the time and I look for ways to say, oh, you can say that in a lot less words. Spend 2 seconds thinking about a different way to say it or how you would want somebody to say it to you. You know, ever hear somebody talking and you're like, please get to the point. Say that to yourself when you're writing. Christy, get to the point. I do that all the time. I'm too long-winded with this. Even when I'm talking, sometimes I'm like, you're talking too much. Say that less. So I say all that to say is when you have potential employers who are only going to spend 7 seconds on your resume, what do you want to do with that? Be strategic about it. Pay attention to the length of your resume. And we've talked about entry level, 1 to 2 pages, mid-level, maybe 2 to 3, senior level, 3 to 5, roughly. And everybody has their own rules of thoughts with that. That's just mine, Dr. Christie's, based on my experiences, both in the private and the public sector. But always defer to the hiring agency or the employer on what they want to see. Because sometimes they'll tell you, especially if you're applying for a senior executive or a senior position in the federal government, they will tell you 5 pages or less. There's no question. You already know what they want. You give them 6 and don't be surprised if you never get a call. You won't get to the interview. And don't be surprised you didn't get to the interview when you didn't follow directions. Also, we already talked about the email address. Proofread, and spell check. Another way to get disqualified, and it goes back to how you communicate on paper. Get a second set of eyes and make sure you don't have any typos, no misspelled words. You ever read somebody's work and you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't you catch some of these things? One, I'm probably willing to overlook 1 to 2 editorial issues because we're not perfect, you know what I mean? And anybody can make a common mistake. I do it all the time. But I'm not looking through 10 errors on page 1. I'm done at that point. So use your tools, and there's quite a few tools online that can help you with grammar checks. Grammarly is a great one. Easy Bib. There's all kind of tools. If you go in and put just document editor, it'll pop up all kind of things free that will proofread what you're doing. Review your formatting. We talked about updating your resume every so often. If you are looking in a job search area of your life right now, you're going to do a lot more resume updating right now than you would if you were just in a, oh, I have a great job, I'm not looking right now mode. Because then you're updating that one maybe twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, just to highlight recent accomplishments you have. But if you are actively looking for a job, you're going to have a resume for the insurance. You're going to have a resume for training and development. You're going to tweak your resume and highlight those functional things that you really want to get across in the first page. Save your resume with the date. I'm going to come back to you, Faustina, in just 1 second. Save your resume with the date. So if I have a leadership, a senior executive resume, it'll say senior executive and it'll say 5/11/2024. It's the last date I updated it. So when I go back and I'm sifting my computer, oh, that's the most current one. I don't have to open every file I have to figure out which one I used last. So always save your resume and the file name with the date. Have variations of your resume, and we're going to talk about using active verbs in just a moment. Miss Faustina, yes, ma'am. What's your question?
Yeah, hello everyone. My question is, I did medical laboratory science BSc from another country, and since I'm here, I have not used it due to some issues. Then now I'm trying to use it. It's been evaluated, and I do apply several jobs, and they do call me. But my problem is, they keep asking me the recent place I worked as a lab scientist or a lab technician, which I don't have. And even when I ask for volunteer, just for me to get that experience, they don't really accept. And I've been looking for that or where to have the training. So my question is, how do I go about it?
That's a very unique situation, and I was leaning towards volunteer, but you already touched on that. And so, if you're having a hard time volunteering, you might. Is this for entry level jobs or what level? Because you might have to go back to entry level job just to get.
Yeah, I want entry level job, but I'm just like looking for, even if it's where I have training or volunteer to have that experience, because they keep asking me, where has your recent job using a lab, which I don't have.
So maybe you might have to get your foot in the door with a lab company, but not doing that specific type of role. So let's just say they were looking for a new executive assistant. And you're like, well, I'm usually doing lab work, not executive assistant. See what else they have that you might have skills to do to get your foot in the door. Because I really do believe that relationships matter. Or if you can find a doctor's office, or if you meet someone who might be willing to give you an internship, but a lot of it is going to be, it sounds like relationship based to get that first opportunity, or look for a job with, I'm just going to make up a company, LabCorp or Quest, laboratory. They might have other jobs that you might qualify for that's not in that specific area. Take one of those jobs initially. And then as you get your foot in the door and say, I can do this too, I just haven't done it in a while. I'd love to be able to get some more training and development to be able to move back into that. That might be another way of doing it. The other thing you might want to consider is going back to school, maybe here in the US, to get more, maybe a certificate. I don't know about that specific industry, but if you could get more education training or certificate here in the US, and as a part of that, that might give you some built-in experience. That might be another way too.
Okay.
But be willing to take a job in that same industry, in that same office, that might not be related to what your background is in, just to be able to build those connections and build relationships. Because I do believe a lot of folks get jobs based on who they know and not what they know. And so as they see, oh, Faustina does a really phenomenal job with this, and she says she has a background, you can have an advocate to help you to be able to bridge that gap for you.
Yeah.
So
Thank
something
you.
to think about.
Okay.
So I want to go back here and touch on the last bullet, use active verbs. So you're actively working on your resume, right? You want to use active verbs instead of passive. So by active verbs, I mean things like developed or designed. Passive, you generally say, I have developed this, or I have designed. So you want to not use the had and the have, but focus on the active part of the verb. I developed a new procedure or I designed a new website. So you want to focus on the active. Now, I love giving lists. And when I'm sitting down to write my resume, y'all, this list has been phenomenal. And I actually included the link. So if you're thinking about an area that you want to focus on, let's say you're looking for a job and they want to know how you've helped people. Well, guess what? If you click on this website down below, it has all kind of action verbs about helping people. You know how you sit down to write and you can't figure out how to craft that first line? How do you describe your action? Well, let's look at some of the words they use under helping people. Like if you're trying to be a therapist: coached, counseled, diagnosed, educated, guided, inspired, provided, referred, rehabilitated. So those are strong action words to describe things that we all do every day. We just never really knew how to find the right category to focus on. So this is probably one of the biggest gems, and y'all can thank me later, that's going to help you when you sit down to write that employment history part. If somebody's looking for someone who's innovative, take a look at the creative skills category. They use words like adapted, composed, customized, designed, devised, illustrated, improvised. I love innovated, introduced. So it gives you the ability to bring your actions to life. Excuse me, my voice is getting really dry. But I want you to use this. If you click this link below, it has so many other categories that will probably absolutely pertain to things that you're going to need to highlight in your resume. And so it makes it that much easier to build your work history. Now, this is another key area. So as we talk about passive voice and active voice, I want to give you examples of results and achievements. I am super, super big on, don't just tell me what you did, tell me how well you did it. That's going to set the difference between you and everybody else's resume. Miss Worthy is not going to just say, I cut expenses by 20%. I cut expenses. I cut operating expenses versus I cut operating expenses by 20% within the fiscal year. You see how much more? 20% is huge. 5% is great. 10%, 20% is pretty significant. When and what time period? Within this fiscal year. The second one. So it had what you did. I cut expenses by how much, by 20%, and when did you do it? Fiscal year. This is also great when you're highlighting your performance accomplishments at work. So if they say, Ms. Worthy, do your performance appraisal, you want to word it similarly. What'd you do, by when, and how much of it did you do? So it works both ways. You see how this works to your benefit? Look at the second one. And then you notice they use active voice. I increased website traffic by 42% in a year. You mean to tell me you brought 42% more people to the website this year than we had last year? That's the reason why our revenue went up. That's the reason why we got more sales this year than we had last year. So you're showing how you connect to the bottom line. And the last one, implemented sales strategies to increase annual revenue by 30% in 6 months. So you mean you increased how much money we making in only 6 months? I want you on my team. As opposed to somebody that said, I supported the sales strategy. So what? That was your job. But what's the value to what you did? So when I say concise, start using sentences like these. 1 sentence statements that say a whole lot. They will make the difference. How do you highlight some accomplishments? Reorganize the inventory system for better performance. Oh, wait a minute. Our system works better because of your organization skills? Phenomenal. And if you can quantify that even more, even better. Identified a problem. These are more generic. Identified a problem and solved it. So you mean you didn't just show up, Miss Bonita, and complain, but you highlighted a problem and you brought a solution, come with it. I want the employee on my team who is just not problematic, but who's solution oriented. You devised an innovative idea. You had an innovative idea. You devised something in an innovative way to make an improvement. Oh, you about making things better. So that is how you tell your story differently. That is how you identify results. So as you're doing things in your current job and any future job, if you're training people, always do this. I used to train when I was in the federal government. Once I created this new national program where I trained literally over 300 state and federal inspectors. You know how many people can't tell you how many people they train? They just know they train some folks. 300 people across the country. That's totally different than 3. So the numbers matter. Don't make the numbers overly complicated. If you know the budget was $1,000 last year and now you've reduced it to $800, we only used $800 this year, that's the 20% difference. You reduced the budget by that 20%. Know where you're starting and know what you did to get where you are now. So it does not have to be overly complicated. I love simple but effective results. And this model helps you to tell your story differently. All right. So if you received an award, and this is a true award that I actually did receive when I was in the federal government, the Diversity Champion Award. I championed individuals within our agency at the time who were diverse in their backgrounds, their skills, ethnicity, and ended up with the agency-wide Diversity Champion Award. Well, that's great to know, especially in this day and age where diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big deal in the private and the public sector. So those are the things that I want you to be thinking about. How do you show up with those things differently? Now, in the rest of my time, I want to focus on, now that you have this award-winning resume built, how do you use it and push it out there so you can get to the interviews? How do you maximize your job search? Now, you might say, well, Dr. Christie, a minute ago, you told us to use the job announcements to update our resume. And now you're telling us to use our resume for the job searches. Absolutely, I am. Both. I'm telling you to do both. And what I mean by that, make sure that as you look for jobs and you find jobs that you really think you're a good fit for, that you go back and you tweak your resume so that they know you're a good fit for it. So what do I want you to think about? Here's some general guidance. One, I mentioned this already. Employers use an applicant tracking system. You'll hear it referred to as ATS. I know that when you're applying for like USA jobs, they use it at times, and they'll have like, they'll say you made the cert. Well, it's a system doing that initial check. And that system will look for keywords in your resume. If they know they're looking for someone with a STEM background to educate professionals, then guess what needs to stick out in Christie's resume? STEM, I need to use that word specifically. Education, training, or what other keywords that was in the job announcement. Why? Because this automated tracking system is searching. Oh, we see STEM. Oh, we see education. Oh, let's now move this forward and put it in the hopper for the hiring manager to look at. It happens all the time. So use keywords from the job announcement to refine your resume. And then that's usually the screening tool before it ever gets to the hiring manager. Now, never, ever, ever give a JPEG or an image or a picture. Don't take a picture with your phone and put that in a system, because these automated tracking systems can't pick that up. They can't pick up the words if you're not using like a Microsoft Word file or a Google Docs file or a PDF. So highly encourage you to use something standard like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, or PDF, because those automatic tracking systems can pick those up. And then keep your formatting simple. When those automatic tracking systems, you got too much going on with all your formatting and colors and bells and whistles, the system is like, oh, this is too much. Reject. That's why I said a simple template might work best, because AI is a big factor nowadays, and these automatic tracking system tools are a big factor. So help yourself by having a ATS friendly resume, applicant tracking system friendly resume. You can achieve both, but just don't do the most with your resume. Other things that you should be doing: attending job fairs. Print out hard copies of your resumes, do the research. You can attend job fairs both in person and virtually. I recommend you do both. There's no reason why you can't Google job fairs in 2024 for medical professionals, job fairs for therapists, job fairs for engineers in 2024. The more specific your search in the year, it'll narrow it down to things that are happening in this year, if that's what you're looking for, or related to your career field. Build a network, establish relationships. I can't tell you how important this is. Miss Faustina, this is probably one of the most important things that you will do as you seek to bridge your educational background from another country to being able to use it here. When you're out at the store or when you're out anywhere, ask people, and I do this with young people all the time, start asking people what they do. When you're somewhere at an event, and if you're an introvert like I am, most people don't think I am, but I am. I can be really shy when I'm out in public, or I don't always know how to introduce myself in a conversation. So now what I start doing is say, so what do you do? Or who do you help? Those kind of things. And so people love to talk about themselves. If you just sit back and listen, and then you'll say, oh, I own a, dentist, or I work in a medical, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, wow, I'm trying to get connected with that. So talk to people differently, build a network. And the best way to build a network is to help other people, be of service to other people. When you start helping other people, they will organically want to start helping you. So continue to build your resources, establish those relationships, and network everywhere you go. Again, I told you earlier, everything you do is a job interview. Even when you're networking and meeting new people, they will make an assessment to say, she's really knowledgeable. She's really well, she can communicate well. She's got great communication skills. Oh, I'd love to work with her in different ways, as opposed to the counter on some of those things. So also, it's good to join professional organizations. So if you're interested in the medical profession, Miss Faustina, I would encourage you to do that. Get a membership. You might have to pay $100, $200 to join a lab medical professional organization. Join it anyway. Go to one of their conferences. Meet people there. If there's something local in the DMV area, go to a local event. There's local chapters, I guarantee you. Join a local chapter and then start networking. So sometimes you got to give a little to get a lot. You might give $150 a year annual membership fee, but you're going to gain all these new people in your network. Also, another recommendation, get a career mentor. So what if there's someone who's already working, Miss Faustina, in that same industry you're trying to get in, or Miss Ashley in the therapy industry, and I do have some friends who are therapists, but they can mentor you, point you in the right direction. And if they're not the right people to get you a job, they can connect you to other people who can. These things matter. Folks do it all the time. We just got to get hip and do it. Use those same strategies to our benefit. You might want to pay for a recruiter or a headhunter. So if you're really looking for a job and you're like, you know what, I can afford it. Sometimes it may not be affordable, but only you know that. But if you can afford to employ a recruiter or a headhunter, you can use that. I love more targeted searches for your jobs. If you're looking for a certain job, put those keywords into Google and let it come up. If you know you want to stay in a certain area, or if you want a remote job, for example, I want 100% telework, type those things in and see what comes up. And then make sure that you have some positive places online. This goes back to you, Miss Ashley. I don't know if you're on LinkedIn, but when you talked about establishing your brand, get on some professional sites like LinkedIn, build and refine your profile there. Maybe post a blog, maybe ask a question related to therapy, maybe create a sub page or a group for individuals who have questions, or join other groups. That's another great way to join other social media groups that are related to your field. There's a lot out there today. Create a presence, find out who else is in that space, what they're asking about, because a lot of times you can learn from other professionals who have the exact same challenges you do. So what I'm telling you is build your profile in a positive, professional social media presence, and then join some groups, professional groups, and only talk professional. I don't get on LinkedIn to find dates. Some people do, but it's not used for that purpose. It's used to network and create those professional opportunities. So that's the space in which you use the tools for the right purposes. So those
That's what
things
made,
can be helpful.
sorry to interrupt you, but I was building my first LinkedIn profile, and that's what made me, because I've, like I said, I've been intimidated by it, but that's what really made me be like, I really have to do this, was the LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely. And you know what you can do? Now, I'm from the Steve Jobs school of anything. Steve Jobs is the original Apple computer establisher. He's now deceased.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I have all kind of Apple stuff. I love Steve Jobs. So one of the things that he used to actively say is, I didn't make it, I made it better. So
Yeah.
don't start from scratch. If you're on LinkedIn and you see other therapists' profiles, look at how some of the Google therapy therapists, look at their profile, see what they're using and how they built their LinkedIn one, and then model yours, find out what you like, pull it into yours. See what I'm saying? So you don't have to
Yeah.
start from scratch. You go out and look at what you really like, what resonated with you, and then you build some of those same techniques into yours.
Thank
It'll
you.
save you a whole lot of time, trust me. Now, Miss Worthy, you asked me earlier, what are some of the top job sites? Voila. Here are like the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16. And the link to where I got these from is at the bottom. And I'm not going to read all of these out, but as you can see, most of these are free. You create an account, whatever they're like. If you go to Flex Jobs or Career Builder or Glassdoor, LinkedIn's on that list, because people do actually, you can actually apply for jobs on LinkedIn, Indeed. You've heard of some of these, I'm sure. Some are new. Fair God Boss, never heard of that before I started doing this research. Next, any XXT, The Muse, Upwork. Let's say you do freelance work. It's great if you want to post and get individual jobs for different, things. Like I build websites. That might be a great place for me to post that I build websites, and I may get someone who says, hey, I need a website built, and get $1,000 project. ZipRecruiter, USA Jobs. I could do a whole workshop just on how to apply for federal jobs. I will tell you that keywords do matter when you're applying for federal jobs quite a bit. And you definitely want to follow the instructions. Every job announcement, every federal agency is different. So you want to make sure that you are tailoring your resume and following their instructions on how to apply and create profiles. Most of these will require you to create a profile, upload your resume to really get the most out of the job searches. But you have to be patient, you have to be diligent, and you have to be willing to put forth the effort. Nothing I've shared today is going to work if you don't have some self-discipline, some willingness to set aside some time and put forth some effort. The other thing I would encourage you to do is track all the jobs you apply for. You ever apply for a job, 3 weeks later, a month later, one of them calls you up and say, hey, this is New America, and you apply for our job and we want to interview you. It's like, which job was that again? How much was that salary? Oh my God, what was that even the job function I applied for? So I do this with young adults. I have them create a tracking sheet for their colleges they're interested in, or scholarship searches. Do the same with your job searches. Make sure that you list the company, where you found that job at, because sometimes they ask you in an interview, well, where did you find this job? And it'd be great to say, oh, I found it off of Indeed or ZipRecruiter or wherever you're looking. And then I always put the link, because if I ever want to go back and figure out where I saw that at, I can easily get back to that job. The address, if that's required, the phone number, the title of the job you applied for. And I do this for my own purposes. I always just copy from the job announcement and paste it in. and just give a description. If I was to take this job, what did they say I would do on this job again? What would that be about? And then the salary and the date you applied, and then the decision. Did I get to the interview? Remember I asked that question up front? How do you know you get to the interview if you're not tracking it? How do you know you get the job if you're not tracking it? How do you remember what the salaries are that you're targeting if you're not tracking it? So this is a simple but easy spreadsheet you can easily set up, but it is a great mechanism to help you to track those things that you are doing. That's a very key part of a job search, if I'm honest. If you're not tracking what you're doing, you could be running in circles or like a mouse on a wheel. And what I like to do is create mechanisms that will save you time, but increase your value and the outcomes of what you're trying to accomplish. And the best way to do that is get organized, have a plan, and have a approach and track your progress in what you're doing. So that kind of brings me to the end of the talk today, but I do want to highlight and emphasize that nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to be more vested in your career development, progression, evolution than you will. Not your mom and them, not your supervisor, especially not your supervisor, anyone else. It's not their job to figure out how to make Christie's reality better or make sure Christie gets the next promotion. That's your job. And so what you put into the process of managing yourself as a brand, managing your career as it's something that's important, and seeing yourself in a confident manner is all up to you. Tweaking your resume, telling your story uniquely, speaking about yourself in terms of those action words and results and how you share the so what, this is why this matters, that will separate you from everyone else. And I would encourage you to, even if you're where you want to be on a job, continue to refine how you communicate about what you do, both on paper and in person. If you're standing in an elevator, Miss Faustina, at a hospital, and the elevator's going up to the 13th floor and you're on the first, and somebody in a lab jacket says, "Hey, what do you do?" How do you tell your 30-second, how do you share what you do in 30 seconds? Everybody needs a 30-second elevator pitch. Well, I'm looking for my next I have a background in medical lab research or whatever that is, and I'm looking for an opportunity. I've practiced that in other countries, but I'm looking forward to a opportunity, even if it's a volunteer opportunity here in the US. Oh, well, matter of fact, we actually have an opening. You see how I did it in a couple of sentences? And that person will say, "Oh, I know somebody who can help," or "Check out this resource." So get in the practice of being able to tell your story to get that dream job or that next job that you want. So with that being said, it has been my pleasure to share with you all today. I am going to ask for a volunteer. I do have a couple of giveaways. One will be a professional portfolio that I'm happy to give away, that as you go to your interview. So this is really what you would use. If you're going to an interview, you want to have a portfolio like this. You want to have a few copies of your resume in this. You want, if you have a business card included, if not, don't, but always have a notepad and an ink pen like this. And what you want to do is, as you are being interviewed, you are also interviewing other companies. As you are hearing them talk, you're coming up with key questions that you want to ask when given the opportunity to ask a question. This will allow you to take notes while you are listening. So I would be happy to give one as a giveaway, happy to mail it to you. And but you'll have to, it would be the first person who's willing to come off of mute and tell me one key takeaway that they had from today's workshop. Just come off of mute and you can start talking, and you'll be my professional portfolio winner.
So the top key thing that I took away, because there was a lot of them, was about building my brand, and that I've already started building my brand by the experiences and interactions that I have. It's just, finding the most creative way to convey that to other people. And then, I can go on from there. And now I also know to quantify and document those things more often so that I can make that information available like on LinkedIn and things so that my brand is always out there to anybody who may stumble upon it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Miss Ashley. If you could direct message me in the chat your address, you are absolutely correct with building your brand and quantifying your results and really telling your story. So you're definitely the recipient of that portfolio, and utilize it, and best of luck to you. And then the second giveaway that I have is for a free resume review by myself. And I'll be happy to provide kind of a general overview. Like if you update your resume and you say, hey, Dr. Christie, I would like for you to review my resume. And so the first person to come off of mute, other than Miss Ashley, because I want to give us someone else an opportunity, and share one thing that you learned that you want to incorporate into your resume that you do not currently have incorporated into your resume. Any takers? One thing that you want to incorporate, it doesn't have to be specific, but maybe there's an area of your resume that you want to strengthen. The first person to let me know what you would improve on your resume. No one? Everybody's resume is perfect? Nobody wants a second set of eyes on their resume?
I'll go again if nobody wants to.
Well, yes, Miss Ashley, feel free.
Okay, thank you. The functional aspect of a resume, I wasn't really familiar with that option. So now I want to tailor my resume more to show off the skills as opposed to the quote unquote like work history, which makes me more confident in submitting my resume to places because that was something my work history and gaps and things like that was something that was really hindering me. So this is very good to hear that there's another way to position myself that can be also be received well. But I guess it's like you said, being creative, that's really helped too. Being
It
creative
is. And
about
the thing about resumes is there's no one right way to do it. And so you have to be strategic and creative about how you tell that story to make sure that you get across on that first page or first few pages what will separate you from everybody else. So congratulations and great job. You will actually get both the portfolio and the resume review. And I will, if you could provide me your address, physical address and email address and a direct chat to me now, if you have that feature available. And also for anyone else, let me put my address, Educational Excellence Inc. If you have questions about getting started or getting through the process, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any general questions I can. Just remind me where I met you at, because I do meet a lot of people. And if you say, hey, I was in that resume writing course you gave back in May, I'll be like, oh, yes, I remember you. And then ask your question. I am more than happy to assist you in any way I can. And so I do want to remind you that if you or you have loved ones or church members who have young adults or anyone who is in college, whether it's working in community college, 4-year graduate school, and they need some great resources, join the upcoming May 18th College Planning and Funding virtual workshop. Ms. Chiquita has provided you the registration link, so feel free to go back and register for that event. And then also upcoming for me, I talked about this already, but every August I host my very own, and this is a community service activity, but I host it's a 2-day virtual college and career excellence summit, where young adults and others who are currently working on their educational pursuits will join, and they will spend a day and a half. It's like a Saturday and a half, part of a Saturday, part of a Sunday. And I have speakers, great resources that they'll be able to take advantage of. And at the end of the first day, I give students an opportunity to apply for it's a small application, but they apply the tools that they learned from the summit that first day. And that afternoon, they can apply for my scholarships that I give out. And then the second day of the summit, I actually award scholarships to students who attended. But you have to attend both days of my summit. So you have to stay to play and play to actually pay to get access to those scholarships. So if you know any young people who could benefit, they're on their way to school, or if you're in graduate school, I don't discriminate if you're currently in school or you are interested in graduate school or more, feel free to join. And so the QR code is here for your use. And so thank you so very much that brings me to the end. And I'm happy to take any questions you have just in the final. I know I'm over my 12 o'clock time, but if you want to stick around and get a question asked, I'll stick around for about 5 minutes. And if not, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I hope you found this to be beneficial to you. And I just want to say best of luck in your resume writing and job search skills. I'm hoping next we can focus on we're going to claim it today. You're going to get to that interview. And once you get to the interview, what do you do then? So we'll see what kind of workshops we have on interview skills coming up, but certainly get to the interview. And if you get to an interview before we do a workshop, email me so that we can figure out what you need to do to focus on that. And I'll be happy to share any insights I have. So thank you all very much. And barring any questions, I'll stick around just a few minutes for any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Worthy, are you good?